Hello, my people. I am back. So I took a little break, because here's the thing. I have been working on my consciousness within, so that my production without will be more integrated. It will be full of more integrity, more pieces of myself instead of more fragments of myself. So that's what I've been working on as a goal. And I've been doing this by listening to my inner voice, my body, my nervous system. I am the divine feminine nature. I have been operating in my masculine for most of my life, which means I've been doing dopamine-based living. Now I find myself mutating, as my beautiful friend Pele would put it, and I am switching into a more oxytocin-based living. My motivation is coming from softness, from touch, from sensuality, from my inner truth, my stillness, not my avoidance, my work in subtle ways, not my work through hard ways, the clever ways, not pushing and forcing. So I have been, I keep saying I have been, like I keep chopping off the H, so weird. I have been exercising this, and last Tuesday I was at work cleaning the church. I clean a Unity Fellowship community church. If you don't know anything about the Unity churches, they are more or less hermetics. They talk about spirituality much the way I do. I am drinking my raw cacao gelatin drink in the morning. It is 10:34. I just want to be honest with you. I am fighting with a migraine. I usually get these, I'm 3 days out from starting my cycle, so bear with me if I get a little loopy. I'll come back around. But I have a bunch of shit to say. So last Tuesday, my friend Megan texted me and she's like, I'm thinking about going to Laughlin. So what do you think? And I know when she says that, she means like immediately. So sure enough, I found myself in Laughlin by Thursday, and we were there till Sunday. And before I left, Thursday, Friday, Wednesday, like all day Wednesday, I was getting my shit together, making my little trips to the store. I decided I couldn't travel with fruit, but that I was going to get some when I got there. And I packed 3 little bags with my raw cacao drink that I'm drinking right now. And it's basically like, I don't know, a few ounces. It's like kind of a thick baggie. So I packed three pre-mixed baggies. So all I would have to do is have hot water. And that's how I get like 57 grams of protein in the morning, is drinking the gelatin. Plus it's a really good benefit for my hair, skin, the whole thing, my gut lining, everything. So I stay with that. So I had a couple of goals. I made sure that I boiled some eggs because they do travel well. I got some grass-fed beef jerky. I wanted to make sure that no matter what, I was getting my goals met for my physical health. My personal requirements were getting met without being burdensome to anybody else. Because my friend Megan and I can have different internal needs. She's smaller. She needs to eat less. So I take that into the account, and I'm trying to make sure my needs are met. So I took 9 boiled eggs. They were delicious. They were 7-minute boiled eggs. Pretty sure they were 7 to 8 minutes, something like that. Beautiful. And I had 3 of those a day set aside, and some Parmesan cheese. So I had basic full meals of just protein and fat. And I was really happy with that. But it turns out when I got there, there was no coffee makers inside the rooms like I'm used to in most hotels. And there was only a cafe, and I didn't know how I was going to get hot water the first day we were moving in. I just started to have this like little panic. That was the first thing I noticed. And then I realized like my friend wasn't trying to go to the grocery store, so I wasn't going to be able to have fruit. And I was like, I didn't know, because she usually always goes to some kind of store when we arrive somewhere. So I didn't know she had mutated herself in her own methods of operation since we traveled together last. It's been a few years. So the habit was just a little bit different, and my expectation was just so. And I had this internal goal to be a certain way on vacation and still hit these certain goals. And you know, I was very, very goal-oriented, hyper-vigilant, constantly on edge. When I got there, I had designed in my head that if I didn't meet my own goals as far as dietary restrictions, that I was going to beat myself up about it, even though like I'm on vacation. Like I wasn't going to try to eat trash food. I wanted to make sure I was doing what I need to do, but also still get out of town because I desperately just need the river. So I was already going into a self-fulfilling prophecy and set myself up for a certain level of disappointment because I had decided it needed to be a certain way, or it meant I was flawed somehow. So I didn't really, once I got back from vacation, I needed to sleep. I didn't know what I was going to say. So I just didn't say anything. And then I worked out. I worked out the first day I got back, and then all of a sudden these thoughts started flowing, and I knew I had to tell you guys all of these stories and talk about these subjects. So anyway, I was realizing that I think that probably the best thing, you know, it was like settling in Thursday evening. I was realizing the best thing I could possibly do was just relax for the evening and get that rest, just like I did when I got back from vacation. Pause, because I was feeling like the need to force things, the awkwardness of the situation and wanting things to be slightly different. But I've been doing this discipline where I cease action until I am more clear, until my energy is more clear, instead of forcing things that don't need to be in action yet. You know, I believe in messy action to a certain degree, but if you can prevent hurt feelings or stress in any kind of way, then do that. Absolutely do that. So this leads me to my next topic. Saturday, I found myself in the river on my little floaty. I avoided alcohol most of the weekend. There was one occurrence where I did drink, and I'll tell you that story, but it was a beer, and I learned something about myself very deep, but we'll get into that in a second. But so I was not yet. I was sober in the river. Well, at least, you know, I had some mushrooms, but I didn't have alcohol, so whatever, California sober. I found myself full of tension in the water, trying to control where I was floating to. And I started to laugh at myself because I realized I was holding so much tension, and for what? Like, I literally got here all the way there to the river to relax, and what was I trying to do with it? With the time and the energy, I was trying to force the flow, which is exactly what I've been working on disciplinary-wise of not doing. So I started to laugh at myself and then realized how much of an opportunity this was to get into my feminine. And so as I was sitting there in the hot, hot sun, just smiling, I listened to some music, got myself in the mood, and I just closed my eyes and let myself flow. And of course, I kept getting in people's way. But I would open my eyes and get myself back to normal. It just, allowed myself to be as relaxed as the environment required me to be. There's this concept called pedestalization, and I never would have glued these things together if I hadn't been working out that immediately the day after I got back. I could have worked out while I was in Nevada at the hotel, but I chose not to actively because I was choosing to be active in the river. I was trying to channel my energy in a more feminine way, right? Because that became my focus and my concentration once I actually hit the river and realized what my assignment was. So pedestalization, right? People we care about, we start to put on pedestals and start to look at and admire them and start to gloss over any flaws that you might see, right? So you choose to not see them. But there's ways you can do that to yourself as well. And this all circles around deep mistrust and a feeling of being out of control, maybe from childhood, outdated survival tactics, perhaps. But this is a process of turning yourself into the other, or the exception. You can put yourself on a pedestal just as well. So what do I mean by that? And what does this have to do with floating or femininity at all, or embodiment? What? Like, let me cook. So these flaws, right, that we develop deep shame over, perhaps we got told by a parent that these qualities were to be hidden or seen and not heard, or maybe we got told our energy was too big, or we require too much from somebody. Things that we feel like are flaws, they become so loud because there is a deep seed of mistrust in our nervous system because we can't Man, I keep having this issue with my Bluetooth, so I just restarted my phone. Hopefully I can get back into the swing of things. Here. Good thing I put notes on this one because I really wanted to have my thoughts organized. So hopefully it doesn't happen again. Anyway, so I was saying you have a deep mistrust of your own nervous system. Why? Because you don't live up to your own pedestalization. You've turned yourself into the other and you've become the exception. There's many ways we do this. Like, I'm never going to grow old. I'm never going to die. Or I'm going to die too young to age, or there's some folks in their 40s like me who lie to themselves about looking younger. Or even older than that. So feeling out of control and having distrust in your own nervous system can come from the negative pedestalization of yourself. Like, you're not living up to your own goals and values. So you have to really chase that, find the source of it. So there's a level of chasing your shame down that you have to do, which is part of this process. You have to identify where your shame began, who said it first, why you're still carrying those voices with you, and start changing the way you speak to yourself. So let me use this as an example. Me. I'm the example. So when it comes to not trusting my own nervous system and feeling out of control, I have sourced my own deep mistrust, my own shame, my own externalization of turning myself into the other, and all these things that I just talked about. So my parental wounds and my shame have been highlighted in a conversation with myself and my father recently. I made a tongue-in-cheek kind of joke about being an accident, because that's what my mother would say every time my conception came up. You're the accident, you don't even look like me. Like, she would say, I'm surprised. I always thought you were switched at birth with a Mexican, which is pretty crazy to say. But she would say it. She would say this type of shit. And she would say this, that, and the other thing. But it was always about being an accident. And I internalized that. I felt like I crashed the party and I shouldn't be here and I'm not welcome. And I have carried that my whole life. I've internalized that. I've sort of predicated most of my decisions for a good period of time in my relationships based on the fact that I could not trust that anybody could actually like me or love me. Without performing some kind of way, like the performative love, I could understand. Transactional love I can understand, but I'm the only person in my head who could truly understand unconditional love. That's how I've pedestalized myself. So I'm being fully open and honest about that. So I'm walking around with this in my head. So I made a little tongue-in-cheek comment to my dad about being an accident recently. And he said, that is what your mother thought maybe she felt about it. I know that's her speaking. He said, my thoughts on the matter, something else. Do you want to hear them? And I said, yes. And he said, you, to me, were a surprise, not an accident. A surprise, not an accident. And that helped me reframe a lot, like in my process of trying to dismantle my motivation and do it from a perspective that's much more in alignment with my deep down feminine, divine feminine energy. After all, isn't that the point of any of this, is to be in deep alignment, right? So what does it mean if I'm a surprise? How does that reframe my entire life? So I really sat and I thought about it. Surprises do take people off their course that they thought they were going to be walking or living. They absolutely do change things irrevocably. It's a surprise. You can't predict it, and therefore it does destabilize your nervous system ever so slightly, even if it's a good surprise. But that doesn't mean it's not a blessing. That doesn't mean it's not needed. That doesn't mean it doesn't have a purpose. That doesn't mean that it's not meant for this. It's absolutely meant for this world. It doesn't mean that it's otherworldly or not, part of the community or meant to be controlled, or it doesn't mean it's flawed just because it's a surprise. It doesn't mean that it's a horrible, there's all these connotations you get from an accident versus surprise. So what happens if I embrace the shame that I was dealt through the concept of being an accident? What if I embrace that and turn it into a superstar surprise, trait instead? What if it becomes my superpower instead, that I surprise people? My nature is of surprise. Hello, I'm a surprise. And I will continue to surprise you every time I mutate and become more in alignment with myself. And I really liked that. That really suited me well. So that's an example of embracing your shame, pedestalization, and embracing flaws, and changing from feeling out of control. Accidents are out of control. And so are surprises. So what? Doesn't mean that I can't trust my nervous system. It just means that I've been running away from the messages that my nervous system were giving me up till now. So it's funny how we get in our own way in it. So, who are you in your head? How do you talk to yourself is huge. Do you internalize the accident or do you internalize the surprise? What do you ride with when it comes to classifying yourself in deep conversation with yourself? Where do you make decisions from? Are your self-parenting voices as harsh as your natural parents, or are you kinder to yourself? Because for a time I was ugly. I was using negative self-talk as a motivator, as a yardstick, and it would damn near killed me, honestly. Because why do anything when you're that worthless? Why do anything? Why try to achieve anything if you're actually an imbecile? Why try to love yourself when you're unlovable? Your parents couldn't love you. They don't even like you. In some cases. Obviously, my dad loves me. I think my mother has a concept of love that's extremely transactional, and she doesn't really understand what love is, and therefore she can't love me the way I need to be loved. But I genuinely think she thinks she loves me, but I know she doesn't like. As I was saying, my Bluetooth keeps going in and out. My mother loves me to that degree, but I know she doesn't like me. She does not. She's always felt threatened by me. And she almost died when I was born. I've challenged her survival personally just by existing. And I'm aware of that. I have some compassion for that. However, the type of abuse that was happening, every single time that I spoke to her, I haven't spoken to her for like a year. I told her happy birthday, but I haven't spoken to her. The abuse was continuing into adulthood. I just turned 40 this year. So you have to figure out how to talk to yourself better than someone like her could talk to me, for example. Who are you in your head? I decided a long time ago to be my own best lover, to truly nurture myself, to be unconditionally loving and resiliently tender with myself. And I truly preach this every single day with my clients, in their readings, in my videos, when I make content. One of the best ways you can act in really be into this is through self-love, putting yourself first. All these things are so important. Being really living in your truth, not trying to pedestalize yourself, realizing you are human and your time is limited on this planet of Earth. What are we really doing with it? Being very considerate with yourself, not beating yourself up to motivate yourself. You can love yourself into a better position in life. And if you're being a fuck up, you're being a fuck up. Stop doing that. Jesus. So enoughness is often because we struggle with enoughness and classifying our own selves as having reached a certain goal because we don't have an external person saying, you made it, here's your diploma, throwing you a party about it. That's not going to happen in real life. We keep moving our internal goalposts of achievement and keeping away praise from ourselves and being this false sense of humble instead, where it actually turns into the reverse narcissism, and like you just become this shell of a person where you can do no good. And you're so self-conscious and so self-focused in a negative way that you become a black hole for everybody who tries to love you. So if you're not meeting your own standards, that's one thing. But you have to stop and look around every now and then and go into appreciation and realize that, yeah, you might not feel like you're doing good enough yet. But control isn't yours. Timing isn't yours to control. Submission into the process and being on your journey and making sure that you're being in integrity is what your assignment is. So back to the alcoholic experience I had this weekend. I went to Oatman, Arizona, which is a ghost town, and I've been there a few times, and I've always wanted to go in and have a drink with the spirits and be spiritually tuning in the best I could. And, imbibe as a libation, because that is a spiritual way of spiritually communing with those that have passed over. I just felt like I really felt called to do it, so I did it. And I haven't been drinking. I quit drinking last July. I just haven't picked it up. And I had a drink. I had a beer. And I took my first sip, and I was extremely surprised to find that I didn't enjoy it. In full exposure, I kind of forgot about this because it was really not a big deal in my head. I did go to my former wine store that I used to work for, and my former boss did pour me a small glass of sparkling Gamay that I did drink. It was early May. I did enjoy that, but I don't plan on making any of this a habit anymore. I did not enjoy the feeling of detoxing, especially from the beer. But I just really didn't enjoy the flavor of the beer. I had a sip of my friend's drink at the time while we were there, and I didn't like it either. I really, truly, I feel deep in my soul that I have mutated past the point of enjoying alcohol, and I don't feel interested in it at this point in my life, which is a beautiful thing. I'm so glad to not really give a shit about that anymore. It didn't define me before, but I mean, it did at a certain point in my 20s. It's a very average thing to say, and I lived a very average life in my 20s. But all in all, I've accepted that was a flaw of mine and worked on it. All these things, part of this loving self-talk and reintegration of my own nervous system, retrusting myself, has been to motivate myself to change and then doing it. Whether it be learning how to work out, because I didn't know how to work out. I was in physical therapy and I took it and ran with it. Now I know how to work out. And I do it all the time, every chance I get. Even when I'm not at the gym, I have things to work out with. I have my own mace. I have this, I have that. I have bands, I have stuff that I can use to always keep working on myself. I constantly work on my diet because I'm a former big back. I love all kinds of food, but I've worked on refining my tastes, and I'm not attracted to the same shit anymore. I enjoy nutritional food like very minimal ingredient food. Whole different person there too. I have a different taste in the type of person I want to hang out with. I need to be around somebody who's achieving something because I'm achieving things every single day. I have big ambitions and I reach them, and I go to bed early, and I live a very regimental life in that way. But I'm also being now very regimental about my relaxation. This trip taught me that it's not going to hurt anything to relax, and I really needed that lesson. I was so hypervigilant and so much looking for the next threat, and so much feeling like there was a consequence for relaxation, and the consequence of not relaxing slapped me in the face. It hurt my friend that I was sitting there so tight about fruit, so tight about hot water, that I couldn't just appreciate being there. So I worked on that, and then that very evening, it was Saturday night, once I did a whole day's worth of mindful submission, guess what happened? She took me to a restaurant within the hotel, and I got a side of fruit with my steak, which was one of the best steaks I've ever eaten in Laughlin. Hands down. Medium rare perfection. And I had a side of fruit, a whole bowl of fruit. And then I asked for a cup of hot water to leave with, and all my needs were met. Friday, I didn't know how my needs were going to be met, and I consciously decided not to worry about it. Saturday, it all fell into my lap. How about that? How many times do we prevent our own surprises? And we become prone to accidents instead. I'm going to leave you with that question. I love you guys. Peace.